This is the last Sunday of a little mini-series that we're doing, that we started at the first of the year. But next week, we're going to launch into this series, like he mentioned, on relationships. And it's going to be combined with an evening class that starts February 1st right here on this campus. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. So.
Yeah. Hey, also, just so you know, I know it was in the announcements, but I just want to give one extra plug to that Sacred Sexuality seminar that's on Saturday. I honestly don't think you can miss it. I just don't think any of us can afford to miss it, to miss this topic, to miss an opportunity to dig into the Word about this, to hear testimony about this, and to engage our culture in this. I hear from people regularly that are asking these questions. Now, here's a wonderful opportunity to do that. So I just want to strongly encourage you to come be a part of that. That's this Saturday on this campus.
Investment is it's not a new thing, but you hear a lot more about it in the last century or two because of its relationship to finances. If you're a finance person in here, you get this far better than I do, but the idea of investment is to make your money work for you, right? So I don't have to work so hard. I put my money to work. So here's a definition of investment. When we use this word this morning, investment is to make use of present resources in order to earn a return or reap a future benefit. So the idea of investment is I have something of value, whether it's money or something, right? And I let go of it on purpose. It's not ripped out of my hand. I let go of it in the hope that when it comes back to me, I have more. That's not right. We can all follow that, right? Now, but the idea is treasure. I have something that I treasure. Maybe a better word picture would be I have a handful of seed, whether it's wheat or corn or whatever, and that seed in my hand can't feed me, can't feed my family, can't sustain me. But what I do is I prepare some ground. I find good ground. I'm not just going to throw it on the sidewalk. I'm going to throw it on ground where I hope it takes root and produces food in the form of wheat or corn or whatever. So there's the idea. I let go of it. Now, as soon as I let go of it, I don't see the return because it takes time. There's elements that need to come into play. But in the case of the investment idea is if I wait long enough, it comes back and I have far more than when I let go of it the first time.
Now, Jesus spoke about money an uncomfortable number of times. He spoke money a lot. In a way, you're like, man, what's this guy's deals with money? You realize, it's because it's our deal. Like, we're hung up on this. And so he spoke to that. And he spoke specifically to this idea of an investment in the form of treasures. Listen to this in Matthew 6. This is kind of right in the middle of what we consider the Sermon on the Mount, right? He says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves can break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where no thief can break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
So when we talk about investing in relationships this morning, what exactly does that look like? I think the money thing's an easy one to wrap our minds around. But what it is this futuristic approach to life, that whatever I have now, I would like to leave a legacy. So in the case of money, I'm going to leave it to whoever's going to fight over it after I'm gone, right? I mean, I want to leave it in a good sense, and a blessing to my family or my children, my grandchildren, and so on. Or I want to leave it somewhere where it's going to produce some fruit. David Crosby, any 60, 70 rockers in here? David Crosby just passed away this week. His estate's worth somewhere around $11 million. You can imagine the conversations around the table with the lawyers after that. Steve Jobs passed away a few years ago. His estate was worth about $10.5 billion. Paul Allen, Microsoft guy, his estate, and he had almost no heirs, was worth $22.5 billion. $22.5 billion. You can imagine, that's a lot of treasure. And you have to ask the question, if there's no heirs, where does it go, right? But here's this idea of relationships that God created. And he created them to be a treasure to us. He created them to be a good thing. something that enriches our lives, relationships. Now, not everybody believes, not everybody agrees with that because of our history with relationships.
We're going to actually make just 4 points about relationships and what they are. And the first one is this: relationships are a gift. They're a gift. Bruce was talking about the seed and the fruit and what that looks like. This morning in the first service, we got to celebrate the birthday. It was actually his birthday of George Jackson. He always sits right here. He's been in the last little while. He's been coming in on a walker. You might have seen him before. Turned 98 years old. 98 years old. He fought in World War II. He's raised a beautiful family. And he's a founding member of this church. Literally, the foundation that you're on right now, the literal foundation, was poured by George Jackson. How did he invest those 98 years? And he said he plans on living to 105, so he's got a little bit more investment to do. But how did he use his life? Did he hoard it, or did he give it as a gift? We literally are reaping the benefits of his generosity and the gift, both in sacrificing and going off to war to fight for freedom, but also right here to worship in this place. He used his life as a gift.
That's called a legacy, by the way. You know, I heard a guy say many years ago, and it struck me at first as a pretty strong overstatement, but he said, everything God does, he does through relationships. Everything he does of significance on the earth, he does through relationships. You think about that for just a second. Just think about the part that relationships play in enriching your life, right? In making us, in a sense, relationally wealthy. Your family members, your marriage, your family of origin. I realize there's probably some pain. We'll get to that in just a second. But God blessed us with this idea of relationship. And we're going to do the whole series in the next 10 weeks all about this. But
the proof of what he's saying, that everything he does through relationships, is Jesus and the disciples. Right? He didn't say, well, here are these rituals he invested his life in people. And in this small group of people even. There was the crowd that was always there, but they were there for loaves and fishes and miracles. But he said, I'm going to give you everything that I have. I'm going to give you 12, everything that I have. And then he turned around and he asked them to do the same thing. And through those 12, again, like George, we're all right here. Everything he does through relationships.
Think about that. We're here because, and those guys would not have been voted most likely to succeed on their high school graduation. I mean, think about the guys he chose. So this is mind-boggling if you really, truly meditate on it. The creator of the universe came down, and he wanted to make himself known to the whole world, and he wanted to forgive the sins of the whole world. I don't know about you, but that's quite an undertaking. And he said, here's my strategy. I'm going to pick these 12 fishermen, tax collectors, nobody want type of people. And they're going to be the key. In the natural, that is not the stuff John Maxwell would have written about. You know, because we want high-powered, academic, educated, entrepreneurial type people, But no, he just picked normal folks that had some normal issues. And we're all here because of that. So the potential for us thinking about the future is enormous.
Mm-hmm. Listen to this verse. And this is an incredibly dense verse. It has a lot of information, but maybe just try to look at some of the key words as we read through it. This is Ephesians 1, 4 through 7. It says, for he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sons. Hear what the whole plan was all along. The predestination of God was, I want to adopt these people as sons. Through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves. Now listen to this last sentence. In him we have redemption through his blood and forgiveness of sins in accordance with the riches of God's grace. Do you hear what's on offer? What's in this relationship? What's in this relationship is forgiveness, it's adoption, it's redemption, it's grace. Everything that we need is in this relationship.
Why is it so key for us to know? You know, in the pandemic, there was a lot of conversation about, maybe we just don't need people. As long as I have Zoom, I'm good, right? I mean, when the pandemic started, there was this scrambling really about how are we going to relate to each other. Do we close everything? Do we wear football helmets? Do we wear face masks? Do we put bags over our heads? Do we? And someone came up with the idea of, I know, Zoom. Everybody will Zoom. We'll Zoom with our parents. We'll Zoom with our kids. We'll Zoom with our coworkers. We'll Zoom with the bank. And if you would have bought Zoom stock, in the early days, you would probably made some money. Not so much now, but.
We'd all been conditioned for it. We knew this was our future. We'd seen it on Star Trek. One day we'll only communicate through screens. It'll be great. And it wasn't, was it? It hurt after a while. And I'm not saying, this isn't a conversation about what we should or shouldn't have done during the pandemic. This is just saying isolation bred a certain unhealth. It hurt us all more than we thought it would. Even the parts that felt good, right? Because sometimes you feel like more people, more problems. And you're like, not being around people for a while can feel kind of good. But that only lasts for so long. And then we're hungry for relationship, for deep, meaningful relationships.
You know that for thousands of years, isolation has been punishment. That's what they did. If you couldn't behave in society, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take all your relationships away and we're going to put you in a hole in the ground, solitary confinement. And you're not going to talk to anybody or be talked to. And you know what happens? Those people are changed. It truly, truly is punishment. It truly is punitive, right? So this idea that God brings us together. But the other thing is that relationships are transformational or transformative because that's how God designed them to be. You know the word community, we talk about community all the time. We're a resurrection community. We're going to do a series on relationship and community. If you took the word community and you put it on a screen, you'd see it's two words, common unity. A common unity. Church on the Hill is not the only community in the country, in the city, or the world where there's all kinds of communities. You may be, a railroad model fan, so you've got your railroad community. You've got your Costco community. You've got all kinds of your sports community, whatever it is. But you've gathered around a common idea or a common reason for being there. Well, the only thing that keeps the unity piece going is you stay in agreement about why you're there, right? You stay in agreement to why you're in that community. And sometimes coming into alignment is transformative. When I was single, I wasn't in community, so to speak, in the marriage sense. I lived by myself. I ate out of frying pans if I wanted to. I got up when I wanted and went to bed, did what I wanted. There wasn't no one else to say, hey, honey, what do you want to do tonight? I just asked myself, hey, Bruce, what do you want to do tonight? And I did that. Right? We can relate to that. There was a measure of freedom. And then one day, I got married. And then it was like, hey, we're buying plates. What are you doing? You don't go into the fridge and just, there's a plate. My wife helped me develop. It was transformative.
We thank her.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, community is transformative. It doesn't necessarily have to be transformative towards the positive. We've seen that in our culture. Matter of fact, the thing that's easiest to rally around are the baser emotions of anger. That's why social media works so well. Yeah. If you can get people angry, then you can get them together into a group, and then they will move to action. And we've tried to use that and harness that in some kind of a positive way. Let's get people angry about the environment or some justice issue or something, and then we'll get them all together, and then we'll make positive change. But it doesn't actually make positive change. It just destroys things. It just tears things down. So, the Tower of Babel is an example. There's a group of people all gathered together in community, but their community was rebellion against God. We're going to build a tower up to heaven. We're going to make our own way to heaven. We don't need you anymore. And so, listen, we have to pay attention. It wasn't, Mom was right. The people you hang out with, right? You can fall in with a bad crowd, and you're not going to change them. The crowd is going to change you.
What did God know when He created the church? He knew that we basically all, not just you because you're from that side of town or you're, a certain ethnicity, we all have a problem. You know what that problem is? Narcissism. That's a big word. It basically means selfishness, that I love me. And so what God does, He said, no, I want to bring you into this thing called my church, not the church on the hill building, no, into my community of followers. And when you come in, you're going to find a new way to live. But guess what? You can't live the way you want and live the way I want you to and stay. Community has this the church, it has, I got to be careful how I say this, but the church is the body of Christ. If there's something in my body that doesn't love my body, I either get sick or it isolates and expels it. Because my body is designed to be healthy. And so God says, I want to invite you in, but listen, I'm the life of this body. And if you're here to breed anything other than life, it's not going to work. It's not going to stay. It's not going to stick. You know, people have said, oh, I just tried church. It just didn't work for me. I think you didn't try the right thing. Now, granted, you can get hurt in church, and no question about it. But I think sometimes, like I think it was Chesterton that said, Christianity hasn't been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. Community is this incredibly powerful thing that God brought into the world to save the world.
There's a crazy story in the Gospels about community, and it's the woman at the well. Remember this interaction Jesus has with the woman at the well? And in a lot of commentaries, you probably already heard that, you know, people were saying, well, she was there at an unusual time, and she was probably there at that time without all the other women because she'd been expelled from her community. She was on the outside of her community, but it was still her community. She didn't have another one. So she's there at the well, and Jesus sends the disciples on to get some food, and he has this conversation with her, and he's asking her to help him get some water. And she's thinking in her mind, men always want something from me, maybe, men always. And so it turns kind of confrontational. But then he changes and he transforms the conversation, and he starts to speak directly to her, reading her mail, saying, I actually know how many people you've been with. I know your situation. I know why you're here. And I'm offering you something eternal. I know I asked for water, but I want to give you water that never runs out. I want to give you this spring from within you. And it blows her mind. It changes her. Because now he's taken down, because she knows you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. These two communities, they don't go together. But he's tearing down this wall, and he's inviting her in. And for whatever reason, the walls that she would normally use to keep men out, to keep the Jewish men out in particular, she decides to let down because of what he's saying. And now her life changes. She's completely transformed by this interaction. So much so that she returns back to her people, the people that reject her, and says, you've got to hear this guy. You've got to hear what he says. So right, they were the community of the put upon, the community of the victims. The Jews have victimized us. They burned down our temple because we were worshiping in the wrong place. And you're the community of the oppressor. And yet somehow God just tears all that apart. And he does this transformative healing work in her that then spreads to her greater community. It's an amazing story.
Isn't it amazing, though, how God sometimes tricks you into this? Right? I mean, if you knew when you were getting engaged everything you were going to have to walk through, and everybody's got a different story, you'd be, well, I don't know. I think I'm going to wait on this one.
I think that's why God puts hormones in us.
To get us to jump so we don't have to think too long.
Don't think about it too much.
Yeah.
Just smell those pheromones and jump.
Yeah. Like, I'm super attracted to you physically, but I'd rather not do the emotional thing. You know what I'm saying? I'm kind of a standoffish sort of a guy. And God says, no, watch this. And you, all right, now I can't live without you. Shoot. Right? And that's what he does, though. But what is he after? What is he after? What is it? Man, stick with us in the series. Come Wednesday night, because we're going to unpack. What is he after? He's after our own transformation. What do I sometimes avoid? My own transformation. Why? Because it's painful, right? Because what was Jesus after? Was he after just shaming this woman or calling her out or getting her to go to the right church? No, listen to what he says. He says, woman, he said, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on the mountain or in Jerusalem, because that's what she had wrong. But that's what he was there to provide and to open to. He says, you Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know. And the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. In fact, he is looking for those people. So you hear what he's after her with an altruistic motive that says, I want you to know who I am because you were made to know who I am. You were designed to know the Creator, your Creator. You're designed to know God as a Father. That's in you. That's in you. But here's the other thing. The third one is this, is relationships. All relationships are a risk. They're all a risk. You know why? It's because we can't tell the future. We don't know in any given moment. Now, I'm not saying we don't have control. I'm just saying that no one knows the future. So every time I open, a relationship is an opening up of my life, a heart that says, I'll let you in. I could be single, but I choose not to be. I could live alone in the mountains and just, be Grizzly Adams and eat the berries and never come to town or something, but I choose not to be. I'm going to come into relationship. I'm going to join your club, so to speak, or I'm going to marry you, or I'm going to do something. But all of it involves a measure of vulnerability.
Can I say, just talking about our community, the church community, this is why there's this funnel that keeps getting smaller and smaller. The wide end is Sunday. It asks something of you. You got to be here at a certain time. You stand when we tell you to stand, sing when we tell you to sing, sit, follow along, all of that. But that's not a very high bar, and so I'll go to that. But then as soon as you make that group a little bit smaller, or a little bit more intimate, then more people say no. Like, hey, would you come to this class? It'll only be about 100 of us in the room. Like, I don't know, that sounds risky. Because then I'm going to sit at a table that only has 10 people at it, and then I'm going to have to talk at that table, and then you want me to join a life group after that, and you just start to feel this tightness in your chest. And what was the fear of missing out becomes the fear of better options. Like, they'll ask things of me. They'll want things from me that I don't want to give, because being in relationship means giving. It costs us something. So there's this risk involved in it. And I tell you something crazy, and I don't want this to sound condemning. I really honestly don't. But it's our human nature, okay? So if you've personally had this conversation with me, I don't think less of you, but just know this is common. This is human nature.
He's talking about me.
I'm talking about Bruce. There's this guy, let's call him Deuce.
Yeah.
No, not really.
He's a friend of my brother's.
When people talk to foster parents, it's like someone has handed them a script and they say almost the exact same thing word for word every time they talk to a foster parent. It's the craziest thing. And this is what they say. They'll ask like, oh, you're a foster, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, tell me about that. Then you say something about it, and then they almost invariably say the same thing. They say, I could never do that. I could never do that. And then they follow it up with almost the exact same phrase. I could never do that. I would fall in love with them. Listen to that. Don't you hear why that's a little bit crazy? I couldn't do it because I would love them. That's exactly why you have to do it. So the other option is no one does it because and then no one would love them. And then children go unloved. And the pain cycle perpetuates, and we've guaranteed that there will be more of this happening in the future. It is a risk. Matter of fact, I would say it's not even a risk. It's a guarantee. You will fall in love with them, and your heart will be broken, and that's why you have to do it. You have to do it. And this is corny, and I don't care, okay? So just listen. God told me this. When I was arguing, I had that argument with God myself. I said, that's crazy. Why would I do that? I would fall in love with them, and then it would hurt. And he said, your heart is going to break every single time. And then I'm going to put it back together to look a little bit more like mine every single time. So he takes from that heart of stone and he starts to make it into a heart of flesh. Listen to, I'll just read this. This is C.S. Lewis, because I think he nailed it. He says it a lot more eloquently than I possibly could, because he's C.S. Lewis. He said, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with little hobbies and luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up, safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable.
It's odd when he was reading that. Again, I don't mean this as to hurt or to be foolish, but that was written about 70 years ago. And when I look around, I see people that love their pets, and struggle. I'm not saying that, please don't take that as a blanket statement, but pets they're right underneath, right underneath the real thing. I'm not my kid's dog's grandpa. I'm sorry. Grandpa's here. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No. That's a dog. I'm Bruce.
I'm going to get you that T-shirt 100%.
Yeah. Again, but you get my point, is that relationships are risky. And so in the natural risk, I'm risk adverse. Now, why would that happen? Well, because we see and we've experienced a broken world. And so you look at what's happened in our world, or maybe what's happened to me personally, and I look back and where I was disappointed, where I was betrayed, where the relationship fell apart, where, and so now you're like, well, my reaction to that would be, I have trust issues. We have trust issues. And again, for good reason. Because when something has been hurt, burned, broken, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to do that again. But you hear what he just read, I think, though, there's this great danger. Because the God who calls us back is a God who says, look at me. Okay, I'm not the one. And so if you want to follow me and you want to be the transformed one, I'm gonna bring you back around, and we're not going to just let this sit there in a closet, infecting everything. We're going to bring you around. So risk is a real factor in relationships.
Think about it in terms of investment, like we've been talking about. If someone came to you and said, I want to start a new business, but I don't want any risk. You say, well, you're not going to, no risk, no reward. If you want reward, you have to take risk. That's just the way this works. And Jesus understood this. But again, he wasn't necessarily talking about money here when he says in John 12, look at just verse 24. I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone. Right? That's the kernel of wheat, that hard, it's safe, but if it gets buried, if it dies, then it'll bear much fruit. And it changes everything. So you can remain just yourself, just the kernel of wheat, hard and impenetrable, or you can choose to bury your life. And we bury our lives, make no mistake about it, we bury it into relationships, into other people. The modern man would bury his life, like C.S. Lewis said, under hobbies, under luxuries, but if you take it and bury it in the good soil of other people, there will be great reward.
The last one is relationships are sacrificial. Every good relationship is sacrificial. Someone's going to, isn't that what we do at weddings? In a wedding, you got these two people standing up here in front of witnesses, and they're exchanging this thing. Hey, I got this at Fred Meyer Jewelers, cost me a lot of money, but you're worth it, right? No one says that, but that's the idea of the symbol, right? It's the symbol of a ring. You don't give someone an In-N-Out gift card at a wedding, do you? You're like, well, that's kind of cheap. But you say to that other person, you are so valuable that I could have spent this money somewhere else, but I spent it on this to give to you, or I'm going to pay it off, or whatever the case may be, right? You see, and so every relationship has some symbol or some action of sacrifice. And that's so when we do an offering here, like Nicole just did just a little while ago, listen, we honestly, Church on the Hill, we pay the bills, we have electric bills and gas bills and all kinds of other things we pay, but God's going to cover us. So please don't ever think like, oh my gosh, my membership due here and it's, the first of the month and I better pay up. No. Please don't see it like that. That's not it. That's not our heart. Every time I let go of money, in the case of money, I'm making a statement that says, God, your worth is far greater than what you're asking me to let go of, and here's the action step. See, whatever it is, God, I declare by letting go of this, that you are of greater value than anything I could ever hold on to. Whether that's money or whether that's unforgiveness or whether that's time, God, I let go of this because I declare you are of greater value. Listen to the words of Jesus, of Paul in Ephesians. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly beloved children, and walk in the way of love. Well, that sounds great. So God's given us a way to walk. And what is that way? It's not the way of religion, the way of tradition, the way of routine. No, it's the way of love. And then Paul goes on, in case we don't get it, he says, oh, you want to know what that looks like? As Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. You know, he's writing to an audience that truly understood. That when we hear that, we're like, that sounds so poetic and so sweet. But you know, he's speaking to a Jewish culture. When they heard the word sacrifice, they thought of bleeding lambs. They knew, they immediately connected the dots. Oh, he's talking about, wait a minute, you know, right? It's like the joke about all the farm animals that want to make the owner breakfast. You know, the chicken says, well, I'll kick in the eggs. And the pig says, well, and someone says, hey, what about the bacon? The pig's like, no, wait a minute. You're talking about real commitment here, right? Yeah. And so here's this idea. He said, if you want to walk in the way of love, it might cost you. In fact, I think it will. But there's a dividend.
Go back just for a minute with me to George Jackson, who was here in our first service, 98 years old. 98 years, 2 of those years, he lived in heroic service for our country. He literally fought for 2 years from one end of Italy to the other, completely from one end to the other, front lines. We have some recordings, some of his stories. He's amazing. But that's only 2 years out of 98. Most of that 98 was just a normal, ordinary day. And in that normal, ordinary day, he was faithful. One of those days, he was faithfully pouring concrete. I'm sure one of those days, he was comforting a child. One of those days, he was chopping wood at his house to take care of his family. One of those days, he just showed up at work, just like he did every other day, just showed up at work and just served every day. But all of those accumulation leads to this, what you see in front of you right now. There was a crazy thing that happened in football recently, and everyone paid attention to it. It wasn't the score, right? It was a man gets hit on a field and his heart stops. And his heart stops. And it changed everything, because we were the community, everyone there, we're the community of football watchers. We're the community of we cheer for this team and we cheer for this team. But then it kind of popped that bubble, and that community just stopped caring about football at all for a few minutes. And it changed everything. And one of the commentators, who I don't know at all, I don't know anything about him, but I have to believe he must have just been a normal, ordinary, faithful day kind of guy. Because on that day he did something, I think, relatively remarkable. He took an opportunity. Dan
Orlovsky, who is the commentator, was an NFL star himself. He probably made a fair amount of money. So this just happened just a few weeks ago. So he's on an ESPN commentator spot. He's at a desk on ESPN, and he's commentating on what happened with this Hamlin, this safety that was hit. You guys remember, who heard about this story? He was hit on the field, went down, they thought he was dead right there. Now imagine, I don't know what a guy, an ESPN commentator, makes every year, but I bet you he makes more than, most of us. And not only that, he's sitting there at a desk with a microphone and a camera, and there are countless millions of people watching him. And so we want to show you this clip of this guy knew that Hamlin, who was a brother, a Christian himself, was hurting. This guy obviously is a believer, and he has a decision to make. Gosh, I feel this stirring in my heart. But I don't know about you, but I'm not sure. In front of everybody? Watch this clip with us.
Football gave me everything. And I think even through the midst of absolute tragedy last night, I think you saw some of the beauty of football as well, that it's brought us all here together. This is a little bit different. I've heard it all day, like thoughts and prayers. And you just heard Scherf and Jonathan Allen say, all we can do is pray for him. And I've heard the Buffalo Bills organization say that we believe in prayer. And maybe this is not the right thing to do, but it's just on my heart that I want to pray for
it is.
Damar Hamlin right now. I'm going to do it out loud. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to bow my head, and I'm just going to pray for him. God, we come to you in these moments that we don't understand, that are hard, because we believe that you're God, and coming to you and praying to you has impact. We're sad, we're angry, and we want answers, but some things are unanswerable. We just want to pray, truly come to you and pray for strength for Damar, for healing for Damar, for comfort for Damar. to be with his family, to give them peace. If we didn't believe that prayer didn't work, we wouldn't ask this of you, God. I believe in prayer. We believe in prayer. We lift up Damar Hamlin's name in your name. Amen.
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 It's beautiful.
Respectfully.
We will continue to cover this story. We'll continue to bring you all the updates that we have. And as usual, we'll see you tomorrow on NFL Live. I'll just reiterate how secondary football is in all of this. We are thinking and praying, as you've seen here, for Damar Hamlin and his family, and truly hoping for some better news.
You know, this is not the 700 Club. He's not praying in front of his peers where everybody's like, yes. You can imagine you're the vice president of Fox News, wherever you are, or whatever, you know, like, he's doing what? He's doing what? I don't know about this guy, this Dan Orlovsky, but I got to hand it to him. In the moment, he paid a price. I don't know if there'll be repercussions, good or bad, I don't know, but you've got to imagine, hey, my act of love for a guy who I call my brother, as insignificant as a 1-minute prayer may seem, it might really cost me. My sacrifice in following Jesus and being in relationship with you. It's easy to be in relationship with you if you never cause me any grief and you enrich my life. But what happens if you're in trouble and you need me? This might cost me something. Man, that's the beauty right there. That's called the walk of faith.
Actually, we want to encourage you right now to take a little walk of faith. It's the walk from the seat to the elements. And think while we're making that short trip, just that it might just be a few steps for most of us. Jesus was the one who didn't say, I could never do that. I would love them too much. I could never do that. My heart would be broken. He said, yes, Father. He said, yes. And he sacrificed. He risked everything and he sacrificed for you and for me. And as you're making that walk, just ask God, what would be my walk of risk, my walk of sacrifice towards a relationship? The elements are open for anyone who believes. You just hold on to them. We'll all take together at the end of this song.